Thank you very much. I didn't know I was highly regarded among my colleagues, so I appreciate the affirmation of that. Hey, I'll go ahead and get the panel to come on up because we'll do introductions here shortly. The thing I would add just to the introduction on myself is that Lily, I do get to work with leaders from the CEO and the executive committee to those leading for the very first time. And it's a lot of fun, but those leaders are kind of captured in this dilemma, and I think it's relevant to the topic today, this dilemma of perform today with what we know works as smart as we can, as best we can, and innovate and transform so that we can be successful in the future. So we can make medicines that make life better faster. And that's what we're faced with. So I really look forward to some of the insights we'll get from our panel today as well. So we'll do some introductions quickly. We'll pass the mic and do that, and then I'll get us kicked off with some of the content. You've got a mic there?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I think it's on. Yep. Dewan Neely here, CIO of the State of Indiana, Director of Indiana Office of Technology. I born and raised in Elkhart, Indiana, but I call home now Westfield/Indianapolis, Indiana now, and glad to be on the panel today.
Thank you, Dewan.
Hi, I'm David Hummels. I'm the Samuel R. Allen Dean of the Krannert School of Management. In my faculty life, I am a data scientist who does work on sort of using highly granular data from firms and workers to understand how international commerce is affecting competitions and worker outcomes.
Hi, my name is Rashmi, and I lead the engineering team at Microsoft, focus on cloud health data and analytics, particularly focused on healthcare, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Pat Klum. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a AI-driven drug discovery company based in Palo Alto called Oranza. Really happy to be here. I've been traveling around a lot. I was born in Singapore and went to school in Japan, and now live in the Bay Area. I am always known as the hardcore biologist who is in love with data.
Good morning, everybody. Joe Donahue. I'm a managing director with Accenture, and I'm the global lead for our life sciences research practice. By background, medicinal chemist and computer scientist, and delighted to be here with all of you and with our panelists.
Great, thank you all for that. Going to bring some more chairs up. As we get started here, obviously you don't have to look very far to see that big data and artificial intelligence, there's a lot of hype around it, whether it's in retail or sports or transportation, whatever it might be, there's a lot of hype around it. So I wanted to be able to take a moment real quick and hear from each of the panelists. What's one of your just fun facts in how big data and artificial intelligence is kind of impacting you? Something in your personal life. As you get that thought together, I'll just give you my quick example. The other day, this time of year for us, Monday nights mean Monday Night Football. And it's the closure of a week of football and kind of beginning the next one. And my son, who's 12, loves fantasy football. And he came in Monday night the other night in a pretty big swing of emotion, which is not typical for him. But that swing of emotion was he looked pretty stressed in one moment, and about an hour later, he looked relieved. And I said, "What's going on, buddy?" He said, "Well, I got 2 fantasy football leagues going on. In the first one, I lost $20 in a bet. But in the second one, which was drafted by the fantasy football application that he uses, I won, and I got all my money back." So he had this swing of emotion from being overwhelmed and stressed, having lost money, to gaining money. Now, I took him back into a feeling overwhelmed and stressed because I said, "What are you doing betting on football right now? You're out of both leagues at this point." So we stripped him away from that. But it was an interesting way how he thinks he knows players and he thinks he can make the best picks on who's going to be winning for him. But the system actually generated a much better pick for him in his experience. So that's kind of been a fun one that's been real time for us. But what about you guys? Dewan, what about you? What's something fun, how it's impacting you?
For me, it's pretty easy. I have a 19-mile commute from Westfield to downtown each day, and I don't leave without checking both Google Maps and Apple Maps to plan 3 or 4 different backup routes on my way in, just to make sure. And so that's a huge part of my day, coming in and leaving.
Good.
So it's funny he mentioned that because I was going to say exactly the same thing on the 45-minute delay in construction on I-65 this morning, but I'll use a different one instead. So we're doing this really interesting thing at Purdue where we're collecting a lot of data about students and using it to develop behavioral nudges. And you learn really interesting things about your students when you have highly detailed phone data and where they've been at all hours of the day. So I'll just leave it there.
I'll take an example. in healthcare. So my parents are in India, and I visit India quite often to spend time with them. But last time when I was there, and I was visiting a doctor with my dad, and I saw they are using AI and big data to predict the risk for the heart disease, and seeing that even in countries which are developing and even in rural area, that was very empowering and great. And it has a long way to go, but good to see that people are thinking and using it.
I was just thinking about my spam folder, and how amazing that these days I actually do not get a lot of spam, and I think that is also thanks to machine intelligence, and I'm thankful for that. But sometimes I do see emails from people that I know that went into the spam folder, and I'm thinking, is my AI spam filter at Google trying to tell me something? And so that's really kind of my everyday. I guess interaction with really kind of a very intelligent spam filtering algorithm.
I think my example is pretty relevant given we're in Indianapolis. Has anybody ever driven in northern central New Jersey? It's kind of a cross between the Indy 500 and Demolition Derby every day. So it's not, you guys have the Indy 500 here every year, but we have it effectively every day on the standard roads. So I don't know if it's my favorite, but my most used feature of AI is collision avoidance in my car. And it's interesting because I recently saw a study that cumulatively from, I think, 2017 through 2025, the area that's projected to be the top area for AI is in the autonomous driving area for collision detection avoidance, over $9 billion. So that's how I use it every day.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here, probably.
That's a great reason. Yeah, great. Well, thank you all for that. Well, as I mentioned a while ago, a lot of hype, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement around big data and artificial intelligence. There's also some resistance. And when I do my leadership development work at Lilly, we're grappling with both of those. As a panel, you represent a variety of sectors here. We've got government, we've got education, we've got technology, we've got healthcare and life sciences. When you think about, and just hear from each of you, within your sector, how is value being added? How's value being created in the work that you do on a daily basis within that sector? I'm going to come back and ask what some of the challenges are. But first I want to hear about value creation, and kind of bonus to this is if you can speak to any measure of ROI on that, it would be helpful too.
Yeah, sure. So I'm obviously speaking from the government standpoint, and for most of our charge for any project or program we take on, it's got to have some sort of impact to the citizen, and typically in the wallet. We got to save taxpayer dollars, and you may feel sometimes they may feel as it's innovation limited because you got to be able to prove things to get so far. But I think Commissioner Krupp set me up pretty perfectly. Two of our most outstanding examples of using AI and big data in order to really impact that bottom line and get an ROI is the fraud detection piece. He mentioned $120 million since 2014. To elaborate further on the crash data he referenced with Indiana State Police, what they did was load, arm an algorithm with historical data from all our crashes in past history, and create an AI algorithm to predict the future on that. So as events come in, we have, college football national championship coming. We have all these events to be able to predict where those accidents are going to occur, and then they can proactively place cars out there in plain sight just to get people to slow down and hopefully prevent those. And I think last check on that, if you want to talk about ROI, is about $35 million a year and just economic impact from having to deal with crashes and fatalities. So two good examples of where you can impact the citizen bottom line and get some ROI.
Yeah, that's great. And not just from a diagnostic, you can figure it out, but then you do something, there's an action you follow. That's great. Great example. Thanks.
So at Purdue, we have two primary missions, education and research. On the education side, we're able to use much better information about students' plans of study to do dynamic capacity allocation. That's led to sharp reductions in our wait lists and improvements in graduation rates. So in the Krannert School, we took our four-year graduation rate from about 40% up to about 75%. If you multiply that by the sort of tuition savings across our entering class, it's about a $10 million saving per entering class per year just for my students at Krannert. In the research mission, we've been really excited because the kinds of work that our faculty can do, particularly in partnership with companies, has sharply increased the quality of the kind of thinking we can do and the kind of solutions we can provide for our corporate partners. So we've built out an extensive data science infrastructure at Purdue that you'll hear from Karthik Kannan, our director of our Kroenke Center, in a little bit. But what that's enabled us to do is to provide a sort of seamless entry point for companies who are looking for solutions. And some of those look like master's projects, some of those look like deep data science projects. And so we have, I believe we're up over hundreds of millions of dollars in documented savings for companies who worked with us on projects.
So again, I'm focused on healthcare and life sciences at Microsoft, and we are focusing patient, payer, pharma, provider in all spaces. But the example for the AI is the one that here is, we are doing research, and some of this work is available as well, is to use AI during the conversation with your provider. And this AI can do speech to text conversion, and on top of that, it can do sentiment analysis and tokenization as well, where doctor can truly focus on the conversation with the patient rather than entering data. And it is also going to reduce the error and the time that is taken by nurses or the healthcare staff towards the end of the day to code and enter everything. So machine is going to do analyze and automatically, code and provide the sentiment analysis on top of that.
So Ranza is a startup, but we are a drug discovery and development startup, and we are 13 people. And I think some of you may know big pharma companies like Lilly, great sponsor here, Merck, Pfizer. They 13 people. It's probably smaller than most of the departments, but. We are an AI-driven drug discovery company, and we are about 4.5 years old. We are very heavily intensive, I would say, data-driven. We've built an engine we call the Smarter engine that really eats data, all the time. And we've gone through 30 diseases, find patient heterogeneity in the biology, and try to apply, I would say, AI and drug and algorithms onto, what makes a good drug. And with that, actually, last year we out-licensed a drug that protects the heart from, the cardiotoxicity, by chemotherapy. And actually, this week on Sunday, we're going to be announcing or presenting at the International Liver Conference. International Liver Cancer Association Conference on our lead program on HCC, which is liver cancer. And the reason why I'm saying this is, we are, a small company, but we are very computationally intensive. And with AI driving a lot of the drug development, it allows us to actually make drug discovery a little bit faster, and just a little bit faster, but actually a lot faster, and and try to make that into a practice that maybe the industry will also adopt. And so I think AI for us is really, really important. And I wanted to say that although AI is all the hype now, I think data, AI, and machine learning is really kind of like, machine intelligence that's been around for a long time. And, a machine learning, deep learning is only kind of like the newest, I would say, the hottest kid on the block right now. But I think a lot of people here have always been thinking about machine learning and AI, in their own respective sectors for a long time. So, if you talk about ROI, I think, the examples I've given you, is the ROI, hopefully, being translated into, the clinical trials that we will run, very, very soon. But we are, at the end of the day, a drug discovery company, and we want to make drugs that save lives. And I think the ROI for that is priceless. So that's what we are hoping to achieve.
Thank you. I focus in the life sciences R&D, both from early discovery through clinical. And as I reflected on many of the projects that we're involved in, we see a pretty wide range of successes and ROI. drug discovery is definitely a tough one, especially given, we're talking about a decade-plus process, several $1 billion. It's going to take a while to see exactly what those ROIs are. And maybe just a comment, because September was a really strange month for companies involved in drug discovery and artificial intelligence. We saw one of the large organizations in the UK who came out last year with some pretty big claims, which probably doesn't help the hype problem of this, saying they were going to increase or speed up R&D by 60% and knock 4 years at least off of early discovery. Their valuation went from $1 billion or from $2 billion to $1 billion, so down by 50%. Is that a correction? Is it something else going on? It's hard to tell. But at the same time, there was an in silico AI-driven drug discovery company that was able to identify a drug in 21 days. It was a small molecule, a DDR1 kinase inhibitor for fibrosis. And, some of the chemists have seen the molecule are like, there's an eye roll. Okay, that wasn't that hard. But one of the companies that has actually commercialized a drug in that space spent 8 years and several $1 billion. So somewhere between $8 billion and several years, we have 21 days and $150,000. If we can expand that and apply that kind of ROI in discovery to finding new drugs that improve patients' lives and outcomes, that's pretty significant. And I think we're still learning how to do that today. And the applications we see for AI and drug discovery are really augmenting what researchers are doing. It's speeding up the tasks that they've been doing and taking a lot of time, frankly. Everything from improving the way they search their internal data, the public literature, using AI to do a first-pass analysis on images from instruments. These are tasks that they're doing, but AI is helping accelerate those things. So we're definitely seeing incremental improvements in drug discovery. On the clinical side, again, we're the right-hand side of the spectrum. So, we use AI around clinical trial design, trial optimization, and site selection. And what we're seeing up to a 30 or 35% acceleration in patient recruitment, where AI has been used to predict better outcomes for the clinical trial. So there's a clear ROI there in terms of speeding up, again, one of the parts of the process of drug discovery.
Yeah, absolutely great. Those are great examples, from drug discovery to capturing patient insights and their healthcare, to graduation rates and accident prevention. Those are all great examples of that. When you think about the success behind those examples, because it doesn't always come easy, the two things that are top of mind I think about are you got to build capabilities in an organization, but you also got some big cultural things going on in an organization. And there's other things. What's been kind of the secret sauce to success? And these examples you just provided, what's been some of the secret sauce to success, and what's been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I'll kick us off again. In the government space, I think it's, and I'll speak just for Indiana, I do get a glimpse of other states when I do some national travel and talk with other states on kind of where their struggles at. And I would, selfishly, I'll say Indiana's probably a little ahead of the game, but I think we've figured out how to work together as separate agencies, how to come together as one, because a lot of the things we do, if you're talking about crash and fraud, a lot of those things spread across agencies. Fraud, some of the bigger things with fraud is being able to know that if someone's filing unemployment but they're registering a brand new vehicle at the motor vehicles, I mean, that's a red flag. So you got to be able to talk amongst one another. And I think in Indiana, we've gotten over those hurdles to be able to comfortably work and collaborate with one another and share the data that's needed. And I think, as you look forward to challenges going forward, I think as states progress in this area and states get better about coming together on data, the barriers are going to be at the federal level now, where there's certain regulations that say data has to stay with, agency X or under certain stewardship. They haven't really embraced this sharing concept yet, that we'll have to continue to push them as we try to keep advancing in this area.
Good.
So I agree that collaboration is important, but I also want to give a shout out to the importance of having very smart, curious, independent contributors. So one of the things that we have been, I think, very successful at doing is identifying some high-level goals, and there are a lot of different ways to get to make improvement toward those goals, providing broad access to tools and data, and then turning it loose to individuals to try and pilot innovative programs and see what they could do. Sometimes, especially like in a university bureaucracy, it can be very challenging if you've got to get every single interested party together at the table, and you end up having 4 months of conversations about what we should do, and you're often far better off just having an extremely bright, curious person tackle something and go. And so I think, but then the key thing is, as you develop those pilot successes, how do you communicate them effectively and get them to translate throughout the institution? So that's been a piece for us that's worked really well.
So in terms of challenge, I would say that in healthcare, security privacy is the biggest challenge. So to overcome that challenge, we have taken security privacy from the beginning. Before we start building or thinking about collecting data analytics, we start thinking about what it means from security and privacy perspective. So again, since in health data we are dealing with the health sensitive data, so we have to be very careful in terms of how you collect data, how you use data with the right consent, and think about it from the very beginning.
Thank you. For Aranza, we are, like I said, really kind of a young startup. One of the things that we do really well is to think about what is really needed in the drug development and discovery arena, and utilize that efficiently with computation. And so we've built really kind of a biotech architecture that really spans, all the way from target discovery, all the drugs that we've looked at, come from us. We didn't in-license anything, but it came from the engine, because one of the biggest thing we want to do is to really show and validate that a computational approach can be practical, and that it actually affects drug discovery, development, and so on. So one of the biggest things that I find that we are very, very lucky is that about 20 years ago, when the human genome was first sequenced, and the gene expression was really all the rage, NIH, NCBI decided that if you need to publish anything, you want to publish anything, you need to put your data in the public domain. So with that mandate, the GEO, which is Gene Expression Omnibus, dbGaP, all these big databases have been amazing, and a huge treasure house for those who could actually utilize it. So one of our secret sauce is really to utilize computation to effectively leverage public data, and we use a lot of that. Otherwise, we would not be able to go through over 30 diseases, generate patient subtypes in such a short period of time. So I think that is, now that I've told you, it's no longer a secret sauce, but yes, it is something that we leverage a lot, and I think this is an amazing effort by the research community, by the NIH, to really kind of put this together in such an efficient manner that anybody who could use it actually could use it effectively. So Aranza is very much into utilizing what is already out there, and because we study heterogeneity and noise, this is perfect for us. And our big thing is to look at recurring biology data, through AI. So in many ways, we are applying AI on biology, and there's many ways to apply AI in drug discovery. And for example, I guess patent publication and so on. But this is really kind of data generated. So the challenge is that we find is that even though we have been at this for 4.5 years, there are skepticism, in really how AI could really affect drug development and discovery, which is, it's very difficult. We all acknowledge that drug discovery is a hard thing to do. And so I think healthy amount of skepticism is okay, but I think, as a industry, at least in the, life sciences, drug discovery industry, embracing, what is, I think is inevitable, is necessary. And really kind of thinking about how to do that, as a community is really important. Education, and that, the drug that's discovered by an AI engine is no, less worse than a drug that's discovered by, a researcher that has been working on this for 30 years. It's the same thing. And we can think about, AI and computation as helping us, to really kind of fulfill some of the goals of the drug discovery, industry, which is to make better drugs for patients. So that is, I think, we still have long ways to go, but I'm very pleased to say that, having been kind of living this industry for many, many years now, and now as a startup going after, great drugs for patients, I think that I'm very optimistic that, that things are changing around, and that AI, drug discovery, drug development is really beginning to take, hold in the industry.
I mean, we're looking for the needle in the haystack, right? And wherever we can leverage deep learning and AI to help accelerate any part of that process, it's a huge win in terms of trying to identify a new drug that helps patients. Look, I think you heard some of the challenges. It's about putting the architecture in place. It's about having the right data. I mean, a lot of the time right now, as organizations look to deploy artificial intelligence or deep learning, is taking the data and cleaning it. It sounds pretty basic, but there's a lot of grunt work that's still going on. Probably 80 to 85% of the work being done right now is to gather the data sets, clean them, get them in some kind of shape. So putting those architectures in place that will help us be in a better position in the future to leverage these exciting technologies, these new algorithms. Because if we're feeding junk data into it, I think we all know what we're going to get out of the other side. I think building up the organizations is crucial. Finding the right talent. Some of the most effective teams, we've seen in organizations that are having success with AI across research and development are multidisciplinary teams. Bringing together data scientists, programmers with domain experts in chemistry and biology and in clinical trials. It's a bit of an arms race putting those teams together. One large pharma company we work with in the space of just under 5 years, went from 0 data scientists in their AI department to over 100. That's pretty aggressive. Finding those people, setting up the right environment for them to be effective with access to data is absolutely crucial. And I think, the last part is probably just managing expectations. Like any new technology, we go through that hype curve. And with some of the folks in the room here, I'm sure you probably have some fun conversations with some of your leaders trying to explain what this is and what it can do for you and what it can do for the organization. But having realistic expectations around how we can use these algorithms, deep learning, artificial intelligence, and what kinds of problems they can solve with the right infrastructure and the right data, I think is really important.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you've hit on this a little bit, this question already, so not everybody has to respond to this one, but I want to put it back out there in a little bit of a different way. It's oversimplifying change to say you find a new way to do something and then you scale it. But if you simplify it to that, finding the new way to do something can be hard, but it's easy relative to the scaling challenge that you have. So you've all kind of given an example. You kind of gave what the success was. When you think about scale and how you take that beyond what it is now, you kind of mentioned, the government sector. Scale might be in a community first, and then a state, and then it's federal level. Maybe graduation rates are beyond business school and into the whole university, and then maybe the whole university system. How do you think about scale? How do you get others excited? You've had a pocket of success. At scale, how do you get others excited to leverage artificial intelligence and big data?
I think you said it, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It starts with those pockets of success, but then I think you look at something you can all get behind. I think it's probably a little, honestly, it's probably a little easier in the government to get folks behind it because a lot of the issues bleed across the agencies. I can't imagine in a private sector trying to find something that would get, 2 separate business units kind of all excited about the same thing. But in the government space, if it's something as big as infant mortality, or if it's something that's opioids and things that's going to hit different areas. It's going to hit workforce development on the unemployment side. It's going to hit our social services with an increase in Medicare and Medicaid and programs of that sort. Explaining to them how we can help you get the right programs in place, get the right policies in place, and share that across the agencies. It's getting those kind of just standing on those big things that really can just span across any one person or any one business unit is what we've leveraged in the government sector.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Dewan.
So for us, I think a key is convincing other decision makers that the patterns you've found and the interventions you've engaged in have a meaningful causal relationship to the outcomes. So I think it's a simple thing to generate predictive statistics on something. We're incredibly good now at understanding what grade a student is going to get in a course before they take it. The question is, what do you do with that information, and what interventions does that suggest? And if you can't explain the why of a thing, it's very hard to convince somebody else in another part of the university that my black box is something that you ought to engage in. So I think there's a real important piece here, which is really understanding the behavioral channels that are at work in our data, and understanding why the modifications or the nudges might work, and whether we're comfortable engaging with them. So there's as much a sort of managing and understanding of data processes as there is understanding the data itself.
So for us, scale, we think from two perspectives. One is from infrastructure perspective, how to have the right infrastructure and architecture so that it can scale. But more importantly, we think about empowering people. How can we empower the healthcare worker to use our technology, our model, to be more effective? So when I used to talk about AI machine learning, people will imagine or start imagining robot coming and scanning them. I'm like, no, that's not the AI or machine learning in case of healthcare. What we are focusing on, how to empower the people who are already giving you the services, how to make those services more effective, more individualized, so that they can take this data technology, make the meaning out of you, and give you individualized therapy. So empowering people is very, very important for scale here.
So, scale is something I think it's really kind of doesn't quite match with drug discovery and development, because drug discovery and development is actually a pretty hard thing to do. Is tightly regulated. You got to put medicine in patients, and so in many ways, and I think my co-panelist has just said about attendance in Purdue and things like that, is that in order to scale, you need a couple of things, I think, in drug discovery. One of them is really kind of the acceptance that AI could actually accelerate some of the things, and in order to have acceptance even within the industry, I think you need to produce data. Like Keith was saying, there's lots of hype around, lots of noise, around like how AI is affecting, drug discovery and so on and so forth. And people have claimed, I can do this, and I can discover a drug in 20 days or 5 minutes or or some whereabouts. But in reality, is that the machine may be able to actually come up with something interesting. Like our machine could do this in 2 to 3 weeks, but then the hard work begins of really kind of prioritizing and executing on, what it means to make a drug, whether, you need to make an analog, whether it gets into humans. So that kind of scale really needs, a couple of things. One of them, I think, is investment of money. To make enough examples, that has been executed on, and show the fruit of the labor of the AI engine, so to speak. And so this is something that at Aranza we try to do a lot, is to bring data to bring reality to the AI phase, and so that's why. And I think when I first mentioned I'm a hardcore biologist who's in love with data, I've coming from the drug development and a biological side, it's always what molecule do we produce? Is the molecule good enough to go into animals, or in vitro, then finally into humans? I think scaling that will need, a lot more than, than the AI engine generating, a list of compounds that look kind of good. But then at the end of the day, how do you get that to and make that practical and execution? So scaling is a tough one, and I think that the more AI companies look into this and execute and produce data that show that you actually can be useful, I think that is the most important thing. And also people who use AI to even discover a drug, people don't really like black boxes. So, at Aranza, we like to, data scientists like to say, I'm going to unbox that for you. and put a face and biology to something that the AI machine has actually generated. So all these, are challenges in scaling, and that we hope that, through investment, and basic adoption, that this the other part of scaling of an AI engine actually is possible.
Formalize it. That simple. We have IT departments. We have finance departments. We have a medicinal chemistry department. We have heads of those departments. Why don't we have a center of excellence for artificial intelligence in all of our companies in drug discovery with a chief AI officer? If I'm here next year and we have the same panel, we'll count how many pharma companies have a chief artificial intelligence officer by next year, because it's coming. I think absolutely having a center of excellence that formalizes this is not just a cool technology. I think the reason we're talking about it, and we have a panel up here, with all these insights, and so many of you are here listening to us, is we see an incredible amount of potential to apply artificial intelligence and deep learning to make better decisions and accelerate everything that we're doing across multiple industries. So why shouldn't it be a center of excellence within government, within organizations, with people that deal with educating executives, identifying the right use cases for artificial intelligence, identifying the right data sources to go after, the right architecture to make sure the data is in good shape to use it, to share success stories across the organization, have a pipeline of projects that can leverage deep learning and artificial intelligence across the organization, and also to proactively deal with some of the ethical issues that are going to come up. So I think formalizing it as a center of excellence within the organizations is going to be a key part of how it scales up going forward.
Great. Well, and Joe, I think you take us to the next question. It's the final question, and then just a few closing thoughts, which is there's implications to this, right? There's some challenges with it. I was reading an article recently of the self-driving car. Many of you probably read the article. Self-driving car hits a pedestrian, kills a pedestrian. Who's responsible? Was it the person in the car? Was it the software developer? Was it the auto manufacturer? Who's responsible for that? So there's all types of implications tied to this. What are some of the implications you think people need to be very mindful of and aware of and address as you move down this path?
Yeah, well, the ones, always comes to mind in the government space with the level of services that we provide and the kind of things we're responsible for. It is the keeping the human involved. I mean, machines can't go off and just make all the decisions that need to be done and execute on those. The machines still lack the empathy and the compassion that the human mind and the human computer has. And so making sure that you're balancing those, I'm really liking the conversations that are starting to happen around this augmented intelligence or intelligence augmentation, to where it's really just feeding the human to help them to act faster and think better. So I think if you think of it as a way to augment your important people, especially when you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis, I think that the ethical pieces will kind of stay in check as long as you're keeping those things in mind.
So I'm principally concerned with the effect on the workforce. So, there's a lot of talk about reskilling. I think our job is to skill people in the first place. And so we've been working very hard in terms of reshaping our curricula so that when students come through, data science isn't an afterthought, but it's an integral part of the experience. I actually have an expression for this: data throughout the curriculum. And the idea is that every single class a student takes should engage data one way or the other. And I think that's having really great success for us in terms of generating students who are ready for this workforce. But of course, there's a whole group of folks ages 23 through 83 who didn't have that experience. And so, I think it's incumbent upon educational institutions to partner with companies who see a need to adjust their workforce needs in the real time, and then and the folks who are coming down the pipeline to them. And so we've been working very hard to stand up programs to very flexibly work with companies so that we can either get you up to speed on what you need to do or get your workforce up to speed, because there's a whole range of capabilities that are not in sufficient supply out there right now, and we need people with sort of become far more have a greater fluency with data usage of all kinds. And so I think we play a really important role in doing that, because if we don't, I think we've got a very severe workforce challenge ahead of us.
So agree with human involvement, knowing the limits that algorithms and AI will have, and also adding and realizing the bias that these algorithms will have. These algorithms have more than thousands input, and they are as good as the training data or the data that it had seen. So being aware of the bias, and then also thinking about the impact, who is the or what's the person, or who is the third party or the other side will be impacted. So one good example is that we have developed several models inside research, and I've heard like the models that we built, for example, predicting the risk for heart disease. It's been successful, let's say in India. Can we take the same model and apply it to, let's say, Africa? And then we always think about this, that what we have seen in demographic or the physiology in India may not apply to people in different geographies. So it's not taking one model and applying it other places. You have to be very thoughtful. You have to collect more data, trials if needed, and then apply. Don't try to just take it and start running with it. Always think about the impact and the bias that these algorithms may have.
So this is actually a pretty straightforward thing for me to answer, because we are in the business of really making medicine, and there is a playbook that you have to follow. So half of the team at Oranza are actually drug developers. We have a medicinal chemist. Our CSO helped develop the drug called enzalutamide, which is a prostate cancer drug. So we clearly, realize, the shortcomings of just having an AI engine, and that, in order to make actually a drug that will go to the clinic, you really need a really kind of a really tight integration of, an AI engine, with really kind of true, drug developers who know what is needed and what makes really a good drug, and I think the only difference that that I want to kind of point out is that I've been in this area for a long time now, and many times even in big companies, data and algorithms are often maybe an afterthought, maybe supporting role. And for Oranza, we have kind of flipped it, where data is driving that, but at the end of the day, to bring it to the goal, you need a group of very veteran experts that know how to do this, and that knows intrinsically what experiments to perform to show that this drug is safe, and can be this compound is safe, and that can be brought to testing in humans.
I don't think I'm not as concerned about jobs being replaced. I think artificial intelligence and deep learning will be used to augment tasks that humans are doing. An example in drug discovery, I mean, it goes hand in hand with humans. I think it's going to free up researchers and individuals to do new tasks, that look at data differently. In cases where jobs are displaced, which will happen to an extent, I think new jobs are going to get created. And again, this is how about upskilling and training the workforce is going to be critical going forward. Off some of the ethics issues, I think it's having the focus and the open conversation. I mean, we see this across multiple disciplines. We're having it around CRISPR and gene editing, about making the right decisions, and it has to be open and honest conversation about, amongst professionals in the industry.
Great. Thank you, panel. Our time is up, but really appreciate the insights you shared, the perspectives you have, and what we can do moving forward. So thank you all.